In early June 2003, RTE, Ireland's state broadcaster, aired this programme on a supposedly new form of protest whereby drug pushers and child sex groomers were being directly confronted by protesters. RTE propagandists said that, though we have always been a nation of protesters, this form of protest was a new and very dangerous thing. The truth of the matter is, RTE's Prawn Sandwich Brigade have never been part of any protests, a form of expression that is totally alien to them and on which they are unqualified to comment. Nor is there anything particularly new in such forms of protest. Sinn Féin and the IRA, for example, murdered people as a form of protest, and that is about as personal as one can get. They murdered Josie Dwyer, a harmless Dublin drug addict, as a protest, and they marched on the houses of many other defenceless drug addicts as well. More recently, they surrounded the car of Joan Burton when she was a government minister and terrified the young mother of one in the process. That was then, of course. Now, RTE, in an attempt to be fair and balanced, aired this programme to balance the rights of protesters against the rights of the child sex groomers they protest against. The presenter made sure to call the protesters agitators. These alleged agitators include 80-year-old wives of retired police detectives who are terrified that 303 potential rapists and murderers from God knows where have been dumped, like an occupation army, in the midst of their tiny and vulnerable community in Santry in North Dublin. The presenter claims that these foreign welfare parasites are not accentuating Ireland's homeless crisis, that tens of thousands of foreign men of military age does not affect the demand for housing. It sees no contradiction in gifting Ukrainian grifters free houses while homeless Irish women sleep on the streets. It believes verbally assaulting child groomers who teach children the joys of scat, look up scat if you don't know what it means, is far worse than getting children to eat their own number two. Pharmacies, it seems, are also sacrosanct because those who disposed thalidomide and other toxins in days gone by can do no wrong. The presenter, not being particularly blessed in the grey matter department, strings a rosary of buzzwords like conspiracy, non-science and misinformation together to pretend the show has substance. Airhead Aoife Gallagher is then wheeled out to make airheadish statements such as, if you believe Health Minister Simon Harris, who didn't even know what COVID-19 was, lied to us about COVID-19, then you believe the moon landings were fake and the moon is made out of cheese and so on. This nonsense is where your TV licence money goes. The presenter would have us believe that books grooming children to have sex and to eat their number twos are not grooming implements books, but are educational, even though groomers from the People Before Profit gang explicitly admit to what those books are all about. Ross Lahey, Philip Dwyer and Fergus Power are all named as legitimate targets, and their photos are displayed on the screen to make it easier for Antifa's active service units to take them out of commission, the very same way Antifa, in conjunction with RTE and Sinn Féin and Muslim cadres, beat up Peter O'Loughlin and a group of Polish immigrants when they tried to peacefully protest. RTE then wheels out some throwaway barrister who is baying for blood in much the same way the Antifa mob bayed for O'Loughlin's blood. They then go on to yap about the vulnerable LGBT++ community whose flags are everywhere and who are subsidised to the tune of tens of millions of euros annually, and whose leading parasites are sent, on the taxpayers' dime, on jollies to Vietnam, Japan and China to indoctrinate their youth into the LGBT, etc. cult. The extremist Green Party then makes an appearance, as does some self-righteous wacko who produces a cute kiddie's pride guide that is, cliche of cliches, inclusive. Senator David Norris, whose boyfriend was accused of all kinds of sordid sex child-related crimes in Israel, then makes a fleeting appearance to make it appear that it is the groomers who have the high moral ground over those who protest against them. When the protesters stage a meeting in the GPO, we are told that we never had the likes of this in Ireland. Not only is that misinformation, but the GPO was the scene of the most famous protest in Irish history when anti-Redmondites occupied it on Easter Monday 1916, and when Sinn Féin repeated that in 1972 to get some of their own child sex groomers out of Mountjoy prison in a famous helicopter escape. The presenter dismisses as inconsequential a violent attack she witnessed by a deep state actor on those protesters, even though deep state assets like Leah Doherty and Eamon Crudden have criminal track records of such psychotic violence on law-abiding citizens. The show goes on to call protesting grannies and old age pensioners extremists, even as it gives a pass to wanted PKK terrorists and Afghan head choppers who can be seen blocking off roads and assaulting young mothers with iron bars. Dubliner Philip Dwyer, whom we already met, is portrayed as leading the County Clare protests, even though the footage clearly shows he was but an observer. This, in Irish parlance, is felon setting Dwyer up for a court case or for an Antifa beating by RTE's allies. Much is made of the Pearse Street standoff when bussed-in PKK and child sex advocates had to be escorted back for their own safety to their Trinity College base by the riot squad. The National Party is then attacked for trying to clean up the number 2 mess the PKK and their bussed-in supporters left in their wake. Then the Irish Freedom Party is attacked for instigating a march on the open-air toilet those Nigerian, Albanian and Georgian chancellors, together with their People Before Profit and Green Party handlers, left in lanes off Pearse Street. Philip Dwyer is condemned for highlighting what everyone is scared of, that RTE and other overpaid enablers are destroying Ireland. Aoife Gallagher then reappears to rattle off a catechism of cliches about powerful algorithms, prisoners of algorithms and so on. Some academic bum pops up to pimp the government's AstroTurf East Wall for All ploy, and the barrister returns to speak on behalf of the decent Irish people who make a fortune off this sham industry. To wrap things up, we are treated to a studio talk with Niamh MacDonald, a People Before Profit fellow traveller, who is in some nondescript fake NGO front group, as well as a retired copper who was their LGBT diversity and so on officer. These crypto-fascists tell us that protests cannot be tolerated if PKK terrorists, Afghan head choppers and foreign child rapists feel threatened. The ex-copper tells us that protests, to be legal, must be harmless and only be a means to let off steam, not to actually achieve anything. This is the same line that was used against Mick Lynch's union in England, and before that with the National Union of Miners. Your efforts must be ineffective and must not discommode your betters. The protesters obviously disagree with that, and as recent polls show, over 80% of Irish people are opposed to the government's open door policy towards PKK terrorists and Ukrainian spongers. We can expect these protests to grow and RTE's viewing numbers to fall as Philip Dwyer's numbers and those of other content creators rise.
This is an SOS for the emerald oil. If we speak our minds, we could be on trial. The regime have lost control, and now suppression is there.